The Waalkill River Valley of northwestern New Jersey and southeastern New York State is underlain by chert-bearing carbonates of Cambrian and Ordovician age. The stratigraphic section, approximately 3,500 feet in thickness, has been subjected to minimally 3 periods of extensive tectonism. The Taconic phase 1 and 2, the Akkadian, and the Alleghanian orogenies. The resultant landforms, that of a series of duplexes aligned across the valley, define the physiography today of the Great Valley sequence. In the left portion of the slide is the Pre-Cambrian Paratoxinous terrains, Mount Adam and Mount Eve and the Pine Island quadrangle sheet. And the lower and intermediate elevations are underlain by the chert-bearing carbonates. Both cleavage development, fold amplitude, decrease from the margin of the continent inwards. And this coincides with an increase of quarry complexity eastwards. Therefore, geological terrains subjected to more than one episode of tectonism result in more complicated quarries. Likewise, geological terrain subjected to 2 or less structural events are progressively simpler in their design and in the ore types that they produce. The scenario is as follows. The edge of the Hudson River Valley contains a series of Taconic age quartz vein complexes, which may represent the alignment of a blind thrust on the eastern side of the Hudson River. The quartz veins are predominantly of Taconic age. Just to the west is the Great Valley sequence and the Cambrian and Ordovician carbonates, the passageway for populations migrating from the Delaware Valley to the west into the eastern Hudson River Valley through this carbonate corridor. The stratigraphic section, approximately 3,500 feet in thickness, contains a wide assortment of both nodular and bedded chert types, many of which are extremely tectonized or deformed, resulting in a very complicated ore, the most complex ore type that we have on the seaboard. As a result, the chain of operation of production events, the chaîne répertoire of production of products and half products in the quarries within the Great Valley sequence is the most lavish and includes a complement of quarry instruments and tools, each designated for specific tasks. As one moves westward in the fold valley and ridge portion of the valley, the cherts are housed within the Sluro-Devonian rocks, and their outline is arcuate in satellite view, representing considerable lengths of doubly plunging aniforms and synforms of ridge and valley type. To the west, under the cover sequence, is an arrangement of Mississippian and Pennsylvanian age rocks that carry cherts, and those cherts are usually visible in river valleys, karstic features, and usually take on the form or the outline of the drainage pattern that incises through them. As a result of several decades of work in the Great Valley sequence and elsewhere, the group at SYNAC produced a typical quarry model. It should be understood that the plan view, this particular model, is only relevant in the Cambrian and Ordovician and the Great Valley sequence, and in particular, northwestern New Jersey and southeastern New York State. It does not have applicability elsewhere unless one can add and subtract fabric correctly to modify or create derivatives of this particular model. It starts with a zone of extraction, which is in almost all cases a set of conjugate joints. The intersection of a master joint series is the location of extraction. These passageways are the focal point of prehistoric activities. And the zone of extraction is indexed by the presence of tremendous quantities of metaconglomerate impactors, hammers, wedges, splitting tools, and some nearly 100 kilograms in weight. All of the rock types employed in the zone of extraction can be found in the stratigraphic succession of basal Silurian rock that occurs to the north of the study area. Therefore, the quarries of the Waalkill River Valley are in part so plentiful because the tool materials for the machinery of mining and extraction are readily available in the till. Again, the source rock and source terrain being the metaconglomerates of the basal Silurian Shawangunk group to the north. As one moves along the chain of operation to a milling station, ore blocks are crushed and dolomite and lean ore is removed at milling stations by elongate hammers with higher clay contents than those elastic hammers of the zone of extraction. These are more orcosic sandstones or clay-rich metaquartzites, which grab onto the edge of rock and hold that edge, thereby penetrating the surface with a flat flake rather than a deep embedded flake. The crushing instruments are plentiful in ore milling areas, and ore that has been cobbed and partially cleaned is passed to a processing or ore dressing station. This is a place where a location where the chert in various grades begins to be separated out, and it's separated out along closely spaced joint surfaces, which we might refer to here as a fracture cleavage or close spaced jointing. These fracture cleavages are flat surfaces that are elongate and intersecting. Some are fanning, some converge. However, this is the focal point of the ore dressing location to crush lean ore away from intermediate and higher grades of ore. The entire process of processing, dressing, is referred to here as beneficiation. And it's during the period of beneficiation that we see the appearance of a considerable number of very beautifully developed anvils, shoe anvils, lap anvils of various types, anvils that are useful for finer work. The beneficiation stations also contain more high rank metamorphic rocks and metaquartzites as well. Hammerstones become more elastic again during beneficiation, and in ore refinement, the ore is hoarded or cached around 100 kilogram non-portable anvils positioned above the zone of extraction. Here is a cascade of rejected material, cached material with fine anvils, bipitted hammers, possibly for creating fire, and a small class of metaquartzite hammerstones that are crescentic in shape, which are characteristic of the ore refinement section. Many of these specimens are rubified and seem to indicate the presence of heat being applied to them. And so the champ repertoire in the first tectonic cycle includes these steps, each with a prescribed number of refined tool types, as we refer to as instruments. These are curated hammers. Typical quarry face, these are taconic, cylindrical folds thrust and placed on the western side of the Waalkill River Valley. Revealed here the transitional beds of the Harmony Vale member of the Ontolani Formation, the acme of the Ontolani Harmony Vale member, and the overlying limestones and dolomitic limestones of the Harmony Vale. The lower black cherts of the Beaver Run member of the Ontolani are visible sparingly along the trace of this particular outcrop. The chert beds have been worked back several meters. And of course, the ice, Pleistocene ice, has sculpted this landscape. However, the human endeavor has resulted in the construction of protected areas which serve as rock shelters and temporary habitations for peoples traversing the valley. This particular joint, which is dilated, is the access point and a critical point in the development of this particular Ontolani Formation quarry, as it is through this opening that the chert-bearing carbonates are worked back in both directions, leaving behind a tremendous apron or cascade of fine and coarse chert debris and hammers. The chert up close, you'll see a variety of different types of cherts, and some are algal stromatolitic and stromatolite replacements. Others are evaporitic and evaporite replacements. Some of the cherts replace shelly horizons, while others replace gastropodal lenses. And there's also evidence of pressure solution or secondary certifications, which are plotted as foliations within these particular beds in this series of folds. The unit that wraps around the pod of chert here has been heated to that blush pink or that rubified portion here to the lower section, suggesting there's an application of fire on some of these particular walls. A close-up shows the penetration of fracture cleavage through the chert and the presence of lime surfaces or possibly pressure solution halos that occur between chert units. However, the fine lines that separate the units of chert are the domains of the fracture cleavage, and the domains of the cleavage further define the microlithon of the chert, which is the unit from which diagnostic objects are fashioned. The accentuation of joints oftentimes leads to the development of a cleft in the rock, which in part reflects the edge of the circumference of the hammer making the impact. And the conjugate joint surfaces result with the release of a volume of chert that falls down into the sloping area. And this process is repeated until the block separates. Close inspection of the chert reveals the reason for grading this particular chert as an ore. You can see the shelly facies or some of the gastropodal elements of the chert. There are phases in the chert which are quite homogeneous, others which are rather granular. The granular materials are oftentimes quarried for manufacture of hammerstones. The more homogeneous cherts for utilitarian needs. In the process of working joint surfaces, bedding planes, fracture cleavages, and crushing stone, occasionally the instruments are found in their working place. And although this zone of extraction has collapsed in part, the hammerstone, or the culprit here, by which the rocks possibly were broken, remains embedded between two bedding planes. This is actually quite common in the Waalkill and in other river valleys that we've worked in, where we find the fine action or activity of the quarry frozen in place. Hammerstones of various types, including this beaked object, are found in the backfill piles. This is a metaconglomerate beaked hammer. The beaked hammers are used for applying a focused compression against the joint between two dolomite blocks. And the repeated use of this particular type of object, pointed and then worked back, will result in accentuating the joint surface to a degree. And after that has been accomplished, the joints are plugged and feathered using fragments of saplings. However, the presence of the beak just serves to emphasize the focused attention the Native Americans placed upon separating the fracture cleavages and parting out or paring out from an array of fragments the homogeneous pieces that could be used in the future for the manufacture of stone tools, which would be successful. This is an impact object that has been split early in its evolution. This is a joint surface right in here, and this particular fracture is very common. Oftentimes these objects are picked up again and reworked into smaller types of hammers. However, this is buried in the scree. The chain of operation of ore block to middling block, various types of lithon packages, scaling flakes, the eventual microlithon for the production of finished stone tools. Each of these stages represents a portion of a continuum of lithic manufacture, each associated with a class, a petrological grouping, and morphological type of hammerstone, like no other in any of the river valleys that we work. These are block boudins that occur in the base of the Harmony Vale section, and close inspection shows the use of large impactors to break out portions of the chert blocks uh, prior to abandoning this type of activity. However, the cuspate surface is not unique to the Waalkill River Valley. However, this is the location where it was first described. This is a middling core. Notice there's an absence of dolomite and even low-grade ore. This is an intermediate high-grade mass, probably 20 or 30 kilogram mass of flaked chert, which never leaves the quarry face. The block is continually rotated and broken down for flakes and fragments, hence a middling core block. The talus will reveal a myriad of handheld block cores as well. These fragments occur abundantly in the talus. A table of any objects will show tremendous flakes of quartzite and hammers associated with the refinement and retooling of broken spalls, the uh, manufacturing of early bifacial cores, and the desire to expose the domain of the fracture cleavage, and then finally the unit of measure, the desired unit, the microlithon. It's from the microlithon that the diagnostic objects that proliferate in the valley are manufactured. This is another slide showing a portion of an ore block dressed. These are dressed ore pieces, in many respects, units of ore that are ready for transport away from quarry faces, and spalls of hammers which are retooled for other purposes.